Hello and welcome.
So I can't hear you now for some reason. I could hear you a minute ago and I can't hear you now. So I have no idea what your questions are, but looks like a lot of excitement on your side.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you for that.
So sorry about that.
There you go.
But just I was going to ask you just to introduce yourself and to show to our guests who you are and what you do now.
My name's Scott Lagasse Jr. I'm born and raised in St. Augustine, Florida. Grew up racing my whole life. Got lucky and won the right races at the right times, and I was very fortunate enough to make it to the NASCAR side. So drove a lot of different things, dirt, asphalt, road course. Just love to race. A guy that likes to race.
So being from Florida, the first question I have for you obviously is, was there an intent to want to just race in general, or was it seeing tracks such as Daytona, Sebring, your St. Pete, those type of tracks around the area, to where you were those what brought you in to want to go into racing?
Really, it's probably just the fond memories I had of being around it with my dad. He did a heck of a job of building a career from nothing, and it was something that we grew up riding motocross bikes and knocked myself out in the orange groves of Central Florida. As a kid, my mom said that's enough on two wheels, so moved over to the four-wheel stuff, and I got in a go-kart and had success right away in that. And then my dad had bought a Florida modified for himself as he was transitioning from the road course side over to the old track side. And it's possible that I wrote the wrong age on a form and showed up the first night and sat on the pole, won the race. And years later, told Helton that I did that. He wasn't too impressed. So,
Well, I mean, it's whatever that gets you there, though, isn't it?
yeah. So, no, I just think it's just I think what brings people to racing is the people, right? Like I have so many friends that I met, and such a unique group of people that are just great to be around. So I see some drivers right now getting back into it that haven't done it in 20 years, or guys I raced against, and they were phenomenal and challenged me to be better racers. So it's fun to see that kind of thing that the sport brings.
Well, a lot of the tracks you've been on, I wanted to ask you, just as a first question, just to lay the base here, what was the toughest track that you raced on, at least in the NASCAR series, in the Craftsman, and then in the Nationwide / Xfinity series?
The funny thing is, it'll be one that nobody would think it to be the toughest one, but I tell this story regularly to the kids we're training now. It was actually Martinsville. And not for the reasons that you would think. I went there to test. It was one of the few places we got to test, and I spent all day trying to get a car to do what, frankly, it wasn't capable of doing, just because of the way the racetrack is shaped. And we got 3/4 of the way through the day, and I had the guys with a setup underneath the truck that would never make it, for a NASCAR race, never be competitive. We knew it. And it took me that long to realize it was me. And so the poor guys, it was a hot, nasty day. They worked their rear ends off to do what I asked of them. And at the end of the day, it was me that was the one that was missing what I had to accomplish from the driver's seat. So that's one that stuck to me. There's obviously Darlington's a blast. I love that place. It's fun, but Martinsville's so technical, and just such a different technique than what I grew up doing to run good there. That was the one that really, really motivated me to dig deeper into my craft than just driving the heck out of cars.
So about Martinsville, is it because it's like a pattern that happens, or what is it exactly?
Without going too deep into the details, right? Like that's kind of, when you study it, there's a lot going on as a driver there, and it is a very difficult racetrack. But it has to do with brake technique, blending the transition to the center corner, and then just where you pick up the throttle and how you have the loads positioned to pick the throttle up. And it was something I missed as a driver, and one of my probably biggest faults in my career is not looking deeper into myself at times.
And would you say that that's an issue with some other drivers, even ones that you train?
I think it's what differentiates the good guys from the great guys. It's that's the secret.
Okay.
What I was too late to find out in my career was that I needed to work. I thought you just showed up on talent and won, and that's not how it works.
Well, speaking of talent and just showing up, something that some fans see is about a track that's about an hour south of you. Probably the most famous track is Daytona, at least here in the States. You ran a couple years there, and by a couple, I mean a long time, almost over a decade there, in the Trucks and Xfinity series. Was there anything special about that track other than it just being Daytona from the driver's standpoint?
it's Daytona. With it home, it's still Daytona, right? Like you drive in the tunnel and it's Daytona, right? With everything, the 24, just for me, it is the place. If I were to come back and run one race right now, I'd probably be there just for fun, right? But that place, honestly, the first time I raced there, I hated it. I went there for Ganassi in an ARCA car. We had a great engine, very fast car. I could do what I needed to do in practice. Then we dropped the valve, and so they had to put just whatever engine was in the truck, and then we didn't have an engine. And I left there saying, oh, this is all about the engine. Dale Jr. and these guys win plate races because they just have the best cars. Again, another mistake of mine in my career, right? Then we went to Talladega, and my rookie year in the Xfinity Series, and I was fortunate enough to be allowed. I say allowed. There was a group of Cup drivers that went out and ran together in a small pack, Smoke, and some guys that I had, loosely become friends with, or at least earned their respect enough to let me ride around in the back of the pack. And so I basically told myself I'm going to follow them and just learn, right? Mm-hmm. And I quickly realized that, to be honest with you, the first time I followed them, I thought they were drunk. They were all moving around, doing crazy things that I didn't understand. And by the end of practice, I realized, these guys, they're buddies throwing every haymaker to win a race at each other, and I get to sit here and watch it, right? And learn there was way more to plate racing than I ever thought there was. So I, fortunately, my spotter was TJ Majors at the time. I asked TJ if he'd go talk to Junior and see if I could come talk to Junior in the bus. And I spent about 45 minutes with him, and I asked him every question I could ask him. And honestly, at that point, we weren't that close, and really aren't that close today. But he's a good person, a good human being. And he told me everything I asked him. And so we started that race that next day. And I said, you know what, I'm going to decide real quick if he's told me the truth or not, right? Is he just feed me a line as a rookie, and I'm going to look for the long wait or the plasma for the plasma cutter, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a joke that they do to new crew guys in the garage, send them off looking for something that doesn't exist. So I quickly just threw some of the moves that he told me to do out, and the next thing I know, I'm leading the Xfinity race at Talladega, and I forgot to ask what to do when you were leading. Never thought that far into it, and so I went to the back and then worked my way back forward from there. But after that, I fell in love with Daytona, and I fell in love with plate racing. It's such a different animal in general, and Daytona just became extremely special from that point. And we had some pretty okay runs there.
Well, I want to, and this is the last question I have about Daytona. I know you have starts from before whenever they repaved it. A big question that happens now in the sport is that super speedway racing, and this is for all three of the top series, is that super speedway racing has lost the charm to it, because it seems as if that at tracks such as Daytona, Talladega, and now Atlanta, it seems as if that it is more a little bit about luck. So would you say that the repave has helped keep drivers not have to have that much of a skill set for it, or is there anything different about it?
I don't know that it's just track repaves. I'm the first guy to yell when they try to repave a track, because I grew up in Florida, right? I like slick, slimy, hot, flat racetracks, and you call it ones you got to use throttle control. So but I think the other thing you got to remember is that the tire manufacturers have gone to work. The tires are way better now than they were 10, 20 years ago. I learned that from Sam Mayer. I became what I despised, or what I always wished I wouldn't become. It was the old guy that was set in his ways, and Sam Mayer taught me that in one of our Trans Am cars. The tire was way better than I was giving it credit for. So I think when you've got stuff like that, you've got the tires, you've got the level of people and how smart they are in this sport is incredible. They're people that they're here for the passion, not for the money, right? And so they're far beyond probably what people think they are from an engineering standpoint. So I think you've got a lot of things going on, but the repaves definitely, I've never been a fan of repaves. They're inevitable. They have to happen, right? Yeah. But it's typically not anything I'm happy to see.
And you said that you grew up in racing. You've seen a lot of it, many different aspects of it. When it comes to NASCAR, is there a certain driver now that you see that just stands out among the rest, or is there a certain group of drivers that you see?
I've got some kids coming that I can't wait to see perform. But I mean, right now, I mean, you can't, it's look at Larson, right? And not just Larson from a raw talent. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? But I look at things like, SVG outran him in a road course pretty bad, right? When SVG showed up at Chicago, Larson didn't like that. And Josh Wise and Scott Speed and Larson, and fortunately I'm privy to some stuff and very, very fortunate that they let me into their fold in regards to Josh and Scott, but they went to work. And Larson, he perfected his craft and then put on a show with the SVG, right? So when you take a guy like that has the talent that he has, right, and then the work ethic that he has, it's you look at that guy, he's Jimmy again, right? Jimmy Johnson, somebody that I always looked up to and dear friend because he's talented as hell, but he also works, right?
Yeah. I'll move away from asking about the drivers, and I want to ask about what you're doing now. I'd like to ask about just with the drivers that you work with. You coach alongside, but you also have an ownership role. I'd like to know about how you handle that and what exactly does that entail?
A lot of learning and a lot of calling people and apologizing for what you did as a driver in your career right now. I don't know how I don't really know how I ended up where I'm doing what I'm doing. It wasn't a plan. It was, I'd helped a kid and a friend in a dirt car years ago and really enjoyed it. And so Lauren Rainier called and asked us to work with Sam Mayer on the road racing side. And for those that don't know who Lauren Rainier is, he's known as finding a lot of talent in the sport. Smoke, Jimmy, Davey Allison, Lars, a lot of guys he's kind of known for saying early on that they're the guys, right? And I tell Lauren I was his one mistake. But Lauren and I become good friends, and he called and said, hey, I got this kid. He's really good. Can you work with him and help him road course race? And so started working with Sam when he was 15 and really fell in love with it. It was a lot of fun, right? And not necessarily, he's so talented that it wasn't teaching the kid to drive a race car. It was just everything else, right? All the mistakes that I made and trying to help guide him in that regard. And I just really, really enjoyed it. And then we got another kid came to us, Connor Mozak, who, is a phenomenal individual, didn't have any experience. He's young in his career. And he performed and is performing. He sat on the pole last week at Atlanta, ran real good. So, and then Lauren and GM started sending these kids that are just great to work with. Sammy Smith. I mean, the list goes on and on. And what I found is they're challenging me. They're challenging me to be a better person and really look at all the mistakes that I made in my career and try to give them to those so they don't make the mistakes that I made.
And speaking of challenges throughout your career, I wanted to just talk to you about about the colon cancer that you had to fight through. I'm sure you've been asked about it a lot, but I just wanted to ask you about how you grew from that and what you've done with that after that diagnosis you had.
Yeah, I mean it was a humbling time. I mean, it still is humbling to talk about because my wife was 6 months pregnant with our first kid. It was completely unexpected. But at the same time, I was in a position and had met all these phenomenal people. And really, I'm not a guy that wants to use favors up, but I used every favor I ever had for that one and was very, very fortunate. I didn't have to go through chemo or radiation. We caught it early only because of the doctors I had around me that were friends of mine that really pushed me to go get checked. And I was 33 years old. So there was, but hell, I had such a good team around me that I didn't, again, wasn't too impressed with this one. I didn't tell NASCAR. I went and had the surgery 5 weeks later, sat in a truck at Kansas and told Chris Rice. Chris Rice had to pull me out of the truck afterwards And actually, we had a pretty solid day. Chris has good equipment, always has, so we ran pretty well. Not because of me, but I knew if I told them, they'd make me go through a bunch of stuff. So I figured if I ran a race and then told them, and those are some of the things that I tell drivers now not to do. Right, like those are the don't do this, don't do that things.
Well, the final question I have with you is just I want to ask about your upcoming plans in the Trans Am series and what all that will be for you.
Man, I'm having a lot of fun. The road course stuff, and then like I said, having the opportunity to work with Josh Wise and Scott Speed and GM. We've got some phenomenal drivers this year. 14-year-old Tristan McKee, 16-year-old Carson Brown, Corey Day. Man, we've got such good kids that's my focus right now is really just doing that. We're one of the 3 approved chassis builders in the Trans Am series. So we build cars as well. We've got some phenomenal friends and clients over there that run our cars as well. We try to help all the way to an NFL guy just got a car last week by the name of Jared Odrick. So I'm having a lot of fun in doing the driver kind of development stuff and really just, again, it's trying to give people what I made the mistakes, right? The mistakes I made so they don't have to do the same.
Well, Scott, I obviously want to apologize for the difficulties we had, but it was a pleasure having you on. Scott Lagasse Jr., I just want to thank you so much for joining us on our first episode here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Keep it good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, moving on after the interview, I was mentioning Atlanta, but it's now next week going to COTA. The Cup Series is going to a track that is now, the track's been redone once again. They've cut off a huge portion of it for the aspect of shorter cautions, more viewership for fans, just for easier for fans to see in the stands. But there's a few guys I have in mind for this track that seem to be ones that I know, and I know saying you know something can end up biting you. But I have a good feeling about these drivers because they have just proved themselves. One's going to be Alex Bowman, the 48 from Hendrick Motorsports. I think he has done a phenomenal job. If you look back at his past 3 races here, he has an average finish of 3rd. He's gone 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Now, if you believe in patterns, that means he's going to be 5th. But I believe that he might be able to take the top spot. His last win came on the Chicago Street Course. There's no reason why that 48 Ally car cannot find his way to victory lane once again in COTA. And then you've also got your other drivers. You've got Reddick, you've got Chastain, you've got Byron, who just won the Daytona 500 and won at COTA last season. Byron seems to have this type of gimmick to himself to where it's really odd. Last season, the 24 had 3 wins in the first 8 races, I believe, and then was quiet for the rest of the season, but he stayed consistent. Same thing with the 48. But there's a few lower names that I also see. I think Carson Hocevar will do well here. I'm not saying he's going to win the race, but I could easily see a top 10 spot for the 77 car. He seems to do very well on tracks where it requires some tire wear. And Goodyear's came out earlier this week, and they have said that they have made a tire that's going to have more tire fall off, and it's going to become a grip problem. But the fun part for it for me is that there may be rain that's involved with this. Rain in the area for a road course can be funny because drivers typically don't drive in the rain. NASCAR has been making advancements and improvements for your lower bank tracks, pretty flat tracks where drivers can drive whenever it's a little mist, maybe even sprinkles. Track might still be a little bit wet. But driving at COTA, we've seen what can happen. We've seen the wrecks that can happen. But I believe that these drivers will do a great job of avoiding the issues, staying out of the problems. And the other driver I want to mention that I believe will just have a great day will be Bubba Wallace. I think that the 23, he clearly has not had the best time there. He's 35th among active drivers among active drivers that have raced at this track out of 37, with the lower two being Josh Berry, who's raced there once, and Jimmy Johnson, who raced there once. Whenever it comes to Bubba Wallace, he finished 38th, 37th, and then he went from there to 15th. I think if you would like your odds here to pick someone, maybe make some money off of it, why not pick the 23 car? He easily will have some longer odds, but I do believe that he will find himself in a good position come Sunday, that he should be up there in the top 10, especially after the work that his team's done during the off season. And whenever it comes to officiating, I think NASCAR's finally found their solution. NASCAR, after the race Saturday night, the drivers' meeting on Sunday, they said that they made a mistake Saturday night at Atlanta. And obviously, a road course is officiated differently. You can have areas where the track is a caution, or just be careful. But I do believe that NASCAR in general has found their response of just throwing the caution. I like a few of the ideas I've seen on Twitter to where you have a caution line on the last lap. I think that'd be a great idea. They used to have it for overtime, but it was on the wrong lap. It was on the first lap. Makes no sense. Why would it be on the green flag lap? Make it on the white flag lap, because safety is the number one priority for this team. So whenever it comes to NASCAR and the road courses, I truly do believe, though, that NASCAR shouldn't be wrapped up in controversy this weekend. I also want to touch on the names of Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilisch. They should be pretty fun to watch this weekend. I have no doubt in my mind. I've seen that the 87 of Shane Van Gisbergen is basically the odds-on favorite to win. I know you don't have that typically in NASCAR, but I mean, the first time he ever got in a NASCAR stock car, he won the race. He went out there, won in Chicago, which is what Scott mentioned earlier. He just outdrove everybody, and he did it well. This is a track that F1 is raced on. So when you talk about a premier circuit, these are the tracks that you want NASCAR to race on. This is a brand that is trying to make themselves stop being a regional sport, as they've tried to grow into a national sport, and they're now trying to grow into an international sport as they've looked into going overseas for races. They're going down to Mexico City later this year. But the sport in general has found themselves in a good spot being in Austin. Coda can present its challenges for the amount of fans that you get in there, but it's a lot better than Texas. I think we can all agree that Texas Motor Speedway should have been what happened to Atlanta, but even then fans probably still wouldn't show up to it. But the Circuit of the Americas will have a phenomenal race, is what I believe. I do believe that NASCAR also needs to stop and get away from their road courses and their super speedways to begin the season. I mean, you just had your closest race ever at Kansas, a mile and a half. Why not bring one of those tracks up earlier into the season? You wouldn't have controversy surrounding the beginning races. Super speedway races, yes, they're built to have an aspect of luck in them, but they shouldn't be ran and decided by the officiating crew there. There's a reason why fans are upset about it, and me included, but I do believe that in Atlanta, NASCAR made the right call, and I believe that that is now fixed. I hope it's fixed where it doesn't need to be an issue anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and in this show, I appreciate you guys for joining. I believe that it was a fun show, even with the technical difficulties. But we will be back here again next Wednesday at 6 o'clock for a recap of what happened at COTA, a breakdown of any of the fun experiences that some of the drivers may have experienced, and then a look ahead to the week after. I appreciate you guys joining, and thank you so much.